It was a warm evening in the spring of 2019 when the mixed martial arts world held its breath. A clash of two rising stars was about to unfold in the octagon at UFC on ESPN+7, a fight that would define the future of the lightweight division. The venue was set, and the spotlight was on two men, each carrying their own weight of expectations. Islam Makhachev, a fighter hailed by many as the heir to Khabib Nurmagomedov's throne, stood across the cage from Arman Tsarukyan, a young dynamo with a reputation as one of the brightest prospects to come out of Europe. Both were hungry, both were skilled, and both had something to prove. Islam Makhachev, the heir to Khabib's legacy. Islam Makhachev wasn't just any fighter. He was a product of the famous Eagle tribe from Dagestan. Born and raised in Makhachev, the capital of Dagestan, Makhachev had the makings of greatness from an early age. Under the tutelage of the legendary Khabib Nurmagomedov, father of Khabib, Islam's rise in the sport was seen as inevitable. With a style that mirrored Khabib's dominance on the ground, Islam had been quietly making waves in the UFC. But in a division as stacked as lightweight, people weren't just waiting for him to fight. They were waiting to see if he could carry the legacy of his mentor and mentor's son. By the time Islam stepped into the octagon on April 20, 2019, the world knew him as a tactical genius, someone who would break opponents down piece by piece. His striking wasn't flashy, but it was technical. His wrestling? Well, it was suffocating. But despite all his promise, Islam hadn't yet been tested by a top-tier opponent. That was about to change. Arman Tsarukyan, the new hope from Armenia, crossed the cage. There stood Arman Tsarukyan, the 22-year-old sensation from Armenia, making his UFC debut. Tsarukyan had arrived with much fanfare after putting together an impressive run in regional promotions. He was undefeated and eager to showcase his skills on the big stage. Arman was an interesting character in the world of MMA, a blend of youthful energy and technical finesse. A well-rounded fighter, Tsarukyan was known for his powerful striking and a wrestling pedigree that was more than capable of holding its own. What was even more intriguing about Tsarukyan was that despite being a newcomer, he was willing to step into the octagon with a seasoned veteran like Islam Makhachev, a fighter many already considered to be a future contender for the lightweight title. The UFC had thrown him into the deep end, and Tsarukyan was ready to prove that his potential could translate into success against a fighter with so much hype surrounding him. The controversy before the fight: is Arman ready? As the fight was being hyped up, in the weeks leading to UFC on ESPN+7, many were quick to dismiss Arman Tsarukyan. He's too green, some said. It's a test too soon for him, others warned. But those close to Tsarukyan knew better. The Armenian fighter wasn't just any newcomer, he was special. Still, the skepticism loomed large, especially when analysts began drawing comparisons between Islam Makhachev and Khabib. The expectations for Makhachev were off the charts. Was Arman ready to face this challenge? Behind the scenes, the fight wasn't just a test of skill. There was a unique set of stakes tied to this bout. If Makhachev won convincingly, it would solidify his place as Khabib's successor and a future title contender. If Tsarukyan pulled off the upset, it would immediately catapult him into the upper echelons of the division, making him a serious threat to any fighter in the lightweight rankings. The weight of these expectations started to build, and there was a palpable tension leading up to fight night. The fight, a war of styles, the night finally arrived. The crowd was buzzing in anticipation as two fighters walked to the cage, each carrying their dreams and hopes in tow. From the opening bell, the fight was a clash of styles. Islam Makhachev looked to impose his grappling game, attempting to take Arman Tsarukyan down early and dominate on the ground. Makhachev's pressure was relentless. His control was precise, and his transitions between positions were almost seamless. But Tsarukyan wasn't just some rookie to be overwhelmed. The young Armenian was more than capable of defending Makhachev's takedowns and keeping the fight standing when he could. What set Tsarukyan apart was his explosive striking. He landed several clean punches and kicks, showing his ability to keep Makhachev at bay. Every time Makhachev tried to close the distance and engage in his wrestling, Tsarukyan used his footwork and sharp elbows to make it difficult for Islam to complete the takedowns. Islam's pace was unrelenting, but Tsarukyan responded with combinations that put Makhachev on notice. But the experience of Islam Makhachev began to shine through in the later rounds. His superior grappling eventually wore Tsarukyan down, and while Arman showed incredible heart and resilience, Makhachev's pressure and control on the ground kept him in the driver's seat. Islam's clinch work, his ability to control the positions, and his relentless top pressure secured him the fight, even if it wasn't as dominant as some had anticipated. When the final horn sounded, both fighters were exhausted, with Tsarukyan giving everything he had in this challenge. But in the end, the judges' scorecards favored Islam Makhachev. It was a unanimous decision victory for Makhachev, a win that showed his potential, but also revealed some areas where he could improve. He had passed the test, but it wasn't a flawless performance. The controversy after the fight, was it really a dominant win for Islam? As the crowd roared in approval of Makhachev's victory, a feeling of uncertainty lingered in the air. Yes, Islam had won the fight. Yes, he had controlled the action for most of the rounds. But was it enough to say that he was ready to face the elite of the division? There were those who felt Tsarukyan had shown enough to deserve a nod for his performance. The Armenian had impressed many with his ability to defend Makhachev's takedowns and his striking, which remained dangerous throughout the contest. Some even argued that Tsarukyan had done enough to steal a round or two, showing that the fight was much closer than what the scorecards reflected. Makhachev's victory, while important, raised questions. Could he continue to improve, or had he shown limitations in his game? His victory over Arman Tsarukyan was more of a learning experience than a statement. The fight had shown that Makhachev wasn't invincible, that he could be challenged, and that there were areas of vulnerability in his game. The UFC community, while acknowledging Makhachev's win, knew that this wasn't the performance of a man ready to take on the likes of Conor McGregor or Tony Ferguson. For Tsarukyan, the result was bittersweet. He hadn't won, but he had proven that he belonged. In a way, his performance was a victory of its own. He had made Makhachev work harder than anyone expected, and though he didn't get the W, he had earned the respect of the MMA world. Aftermath: what lies ahead for both fighters? In the end, the fight between Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan was a pivotal moment in both of their careers. Islam may have won, but Tsarukyan walked away with a reputation that was only going to continue to rise. Both fighters would go on to become prominent figures in the lightweight division, with Makhachev's journey leading him to UFC title fights in the years that followed. As for Tsarukyan, the future was bright. He would later become a top contender, earning his own shot at the elite of the division. The fight was more than just a clash of two men. It was a symbol of the changing tides in the lightweight division. It was a passing of the torch from one rising star to another, and the MMA world had been reminded once again that in this sport, nothing is ever certain. The UFC on ESPN+7 was a night where two fighters, full of promise and potential, showcased their skills and gave us a glimpse into what would come next in the lightweight division.